Welcome, dear travelers of the night. I'm your guide through the gentle corridors of history, here on Mystic Bedtime Stories, where ancient tales meet modern rest. Tonight, we journey far from the familiar sounds of your evening routine, across oceans and through millennia, to a land where dragons once danced with fairies and bronze drums echoed through mist-covered valleys. If you're new to our channel, you've found a sanctuary for the restless mind, a place where history becomes a lullaby, and the weight of the day dissolves into the soft whispers of bygone ages. Here, we believe that the most profound rest comes not from emptiness, but from connection to something greater than ourselves, something timeless and eternal. So settle back now into your most comfortable position. Feel your shoulders release their burden, your breathing slow and deepen. Tonight, we're not just learning about the past, we're allowing it to cradle us, to carry us gently toward sleep on the wings of wonder. Close your eyes if you wish, or let them rest softly on a distant point. Feel yourself becoming weightless, as if floating on warm, ancient waters. The modern world, with all its urgency and noise, is fading now, replaced by something far older, far more peaceful. We're traveling tonight to a land of emerald rice paddies and sacred mountains, where the first Vietnamese kingdoms rose from legend into history. This is the story of Vân Lang and O Lac, civilizations that flourished when the world was young, when the boundary between myth and reality was as soft as morning mist on a tranquil lake. Picture, if you will, the landscape of ancient Vietnam 25 centuries ago. Imagine vast forests stretching endlessly toward distant horizons, their canopy so thick that only whispers of sunlight reach the forest floor. Between these ancient woods, rivers flow like silver ribbons, carrying the stories of the land in their gentle currents, and there, in the fertile deltas and valleys, the first rice paddies glisten like mirrors, reflecting not just the sky above, but the hopes and dreams of a people just beginning to write their story upon the earth. This is not merely a tale of kingdoms and kings, though we will meet legendary rulers whose names still echo in Vietnamese hearts today. This is a story of humanity's eternal dance with nature, of a people who learned to read the language of rivers and seasons, who discovered that true strength comes not from conquering the land, but from learning to live in harmony with its rhythms. As we begin this journey together, let the gentle sound of my voice become like a river carrying you downstream, away from the concerns of today, and toward a place where time moves differently, where each moment stretches like a cat in warm sunlight, unhurried and content. The bronze drums are calling now, their deep, resonant tones drifting across the centuries to reach us here, in this quiet moment we share. They speak of ceremonies under starlit skies, of communities gathered in celebration and reverence, of a time when the sacred and the everyday were woven together like threads in an exquisite tapestry. So breathe deeply now, and let yourself sink into this ancient world. Feel the warm, humid air on your skin. Hear the distant splash of water buffalo in the river, the soft rustle of bamboo in the evening breeze. You are safe here, cradled by history itself, surrounded by the gentle spirits of those who came before us. Tonight, we sleep with the ancients, and in their dreams, we find our own deepest rest. Long, long ago, when the world was still soft and malleable, when the boundaries between heaven and earth were as fluid as morning clouds, there lived a dragon king beneath the emerald waters of the South China Sea. His name was Lac Long Quan, and he was no ordinary dragon. He was the very essence of water itself, the spirit that moved through every river, every stream, every drop of rain that blessed the fertile land of what would one day be called Vietnam. Feel yourself floating now, suspended in these ancient waters where time moves like honey and every current carries the memory of creation. The Dragon King's domain stretched far beneath the waves, where coral palaces glowed with their own inner light, and schools of silver fish moved like living constellations through halls carved from pearl and jade. But Loch Long Quan was restless, for even dragons dream of something beyond their realm. Each day, he would rise from his underwater kingdom and walk upon the land, taking human form to explore the mountains and valleys, the dense forests where tigers padded silently through dappled sunlight, and orchids bloomed in colors that had no names. Now, in the highest peaks of these same mountains, where the air grew thin and the sky seemed close enough to touch, lived a fairy of extraordinary beauty. Her name was U Ko, and she was daughter to the mountain god himself. Where Loch Long Quan was the embodiment of flowing water, she was the spirit of eternal stone, of peaks that touched the heavens, of ancient trees that had watched the world grow old around them. Picture her now, as she moves through her mountain realm like a whisper of wind through pine needles. Her robes seem woven from morning mist, and her hair flows like waterfalls cascading down granite cliffs. In her footsteps, wildflowers bloom, and even the shyest creatures of the forest pause to bask in her gentle presence. The fairy would often descend from her mountain home to walk among the lower hills, gathering healing herbs and singing ancient songs that made the very stones weep with their beauty. It was on one such journey that destiny, patient as it always is, finally brought these two immortal beings together. The meeting happened beside a lake so perfectly still it might have been carved from a single piece of blue-green jade. Loch Long Quan had emerged from its depths in his human form, water streaming from his dark hair like liquid diamonds. At the same moment, Oko appeared at the lake's edge, her bare feet making no sound on the smooth stones. For a long moment, neither spoke. The Dragon King saw in the fairy all the beauty and serenity of the high places he had never known. The mountain fairy saw in him the depths and mysteries of the waters that called to something deep within her immortal heart. They were opposites, these two, as different as earth and sea, yet each recognized in the other their perfect complement. Their courtship unfolded like the slow blooming of a century flower. Loch Long Quan would rise from his aquatic realm each dawn to meet Oko in the borderlands between mountain and sea. She would descend from her peaks each sunset to walk with him along the shores where waves kissed sand in eternal devotion. They spoke in languages older than human words, their conversation the whisper of wind through water reeds, the distant thunder of waterfalls, the soft percussion of rain on leaves. In time, their love grew so powerful that it began to transform the very landscape around them. Where their feet touched the earth together, new springs bubbled up from hidden depths. Where they shared their laughter, new valleys opened like cupped hands to catch the blessings of sky and sea. And so they were wed, these two immortal beings, in a ceremony witnessed by all the spirits of land and water. The mountains themselves bent forward to observe, while the seas grew calm and clear as glass. Even the sun paused longer in the sky that day, reluctant to end such perfect joy. From their union came a miracle that would echo through all the ages to come. Oko, the mountain fairy, laid a single egg of extraordinary size and beauty. But this was no ordinary egg, for it contained within it not one life, but 100. When the time came for birth, the egg opened like a lotus flower at dawn, and from it came 100 children, each one perfect, each one carrying within their mortal forms a spark of both dragon and fairy nature. These children were the very first Vietnamese people, and in their veins flowed the combined essence of mountain steadiness and water adaptability. From their fairy mother, they inherited love of the high places, patience like stone, and the ability to endure. From their dragon father came the wisdom of depths, the gift of going with the flow while never losing their essential nature, and an unbreakable connection to the life-giving waters. But even the greatest love stories must sometimes know the bittersweet taste of separation. As their children grew and flourished, Lac Long Quan felt the ancient call of his underwater kingdom growing stronger. The responsibilities of the deep places weighed upon his immortal shoulders like the pressure of fathoms. Meanwhile, Ao Ko heard in her dreams the songs of her mountain home, the whispered prayers of spirits who needed their goddess to return. With wisdom born of deep love, they made a decision that would shape the destiny of their descendants forever. 50 of their children would go with Lac Long Quan to the coastal regions and deltas, learning the ways of water, becoming masters of rivers and seas, growing rice in flooded fields, and building their lives in harmony with the rhythms of tide and monsoon. The other 50 would follow Ao Ko to the highland regions, becoming people of the mountains and forests, learning to read the language of wind through trees, to find their way by the patterns of stars barely visible through dense canopies, to live as guardians of the high, wild places. Yet even in separation, the love between dragon and fairy endured. They promised that should their descendants ever face mortal danger, should the very survival of their people hang in the balance, they would reunite. Their combined power flowing through their children like a river returning to the sea. And so the first Vietnamese families spread across the land that would become their eternal home, carrying within them this sacred legacy. In every Vietnamese heart, even today, beats the dual rhythm of mountain and sea, the steady pulse of stone and the flowing melody of water. When they plant rice in flooded paddies, they honor their dragon father. When they climb to mountain shrines to pray, they remember their fairy mother. As you rest now in the gentle embrace of this ancient story, feel that same duality within yourself. You too carry the strength of mountains and the adaptability of water. You too are part of something larger than yourself, connected to all who came before and all who will come after. Let the love of Lac Long Quan and Ao Ko surround you like a warm embrace, their eternal devotion a lullaby that carries you deeper into peaceful rest. The children of the dragon and fairy are settling down to sleep now, in their villages by the water and their clearings in the mountains. Their dreams are your dreams, their peace your peace. As the ancient story continues to unfold in the gentle darkness of night, time flows like a gentle river now, carrying us forward through the centuries, yet keeping us cradled in the same peaceful current of story and dream. The children of Lac Long Quan and Ao Ko have grown into a people, scattered like stars across the fertile landscape of what we now call northern Vietnam. Their descendants have learned the ancient arts of their immortal ancestors, and from their simple villages, something magnificent is beginning to emerge. Picture yourself standing on a hilltop in this primordial landscape some 27 centuries ago. The morning mist clings to the valleys below like the breath of sleeping dragons, and through the haze, you can see the glimmer of countless rice paddies, each one a perfect mirror reflecting the soft gray sky. This is the birth moment of Vân Lang, the very first kingdom of the Vietnamese people, rising not through conquest or ambition, but through the natural flowering of a civilization that understood the deepest secrets of living in harmony with the land. In these misty valleys and on these verdant hills, the descendants of the dragon and fairy have discovered something remarkable. They have learned that water, when guided with wisdom and patience, can transform the earth itself into abundance. The rice paddies spread before you like an enormous manuscript written in the language of survival and prosperity, each terrace a sentence in the story of human cooperation with nature's own rhythms. The people move through this landscape with the fluid grace inherited from their dragon father and the patient strength given by their fairy mother. Watch them as they work their fields in the early morning, their movements synchronized not by commands or schedules, but by the ancient understanding that flows in their very blood. When one family needs help with planting, neighbors appear like morning dew, natural and essential. When the rains come late, the entire community gathers to share water and hope with equal generosity. From this harmony arose the need for guidance, for someone who could speak to both the practical needs of the people and the spiritual requirements of the land itself. And so, like a lotus rising from still water, came the first of the Hùng Kings, whose very name means heroic or fierce, though their fierceness was not that of the warrior, but of the gardener who will not let his people go hungry, of the father who protects not through violence, but through unshakable devotion. The first Hùng King was himself a descendant of the dragon and fairy, carrying within his mortal frame the wisdom of both mountain and sea. When he spoke, people heard in his voice the authority of deep waters and the permanence of ancient stone. When he walked among his people, they saw in his bearing the grace of flowing water and the stability of mountain roots. But this king understood something that would echo through Vietnamese culture for millennia to come. True leadership is not the imposition of one will upon many, but the harmonious coordination of many wills toward common flourishing. And so he established the kingdom of Vân Long not as a pyramid with himself at the apex, but as a living organism, with each part essential to the health of the whole. The land was divided into 15 regions, each called a bow, and each bow was like a family within the larger family of the kingdom. The king appointed governors, but these were not distant bureaucrats ruling through fear or force. They were respected elders, chosen for their wisdom and their deep understanding of local needs and customs. Each bow maintained its own character, its own traditions, its own relationship with the particular landscape it inhabited, while remaining connected to the greater whole through bonds of kinship and mutual care. Imagine, if you will, walking through one of these ancient bow on a market day. The air is filled with the gentle sounds of commerce and community, the soft splash of boats arriving at the riverside market, laden with goods from distant regions, the melodic calls of vendors announcing their wares in voices trained to carry across water and through morning mist. Here, a boat from the coastal regions brings dried fish and seaweed, while another from the mountain areas offers precious woods and medicinal herbs gathered from high forests where few dare to venture. The people gather not just to trade goods, but to share stories, to renew friendships that span generations, to arrange marriages that will weave the communities even more tightly together. Children dart between the adults like schools of small fish, their laughter adding music to the gentle murmur of conversation. Elderly storytellers sit in places of honor, their voices carrying the accumulated wisdom of ages as they share tales that teach and entertain in equal measure. But Vân Long was more than just a collection of communities held together by practical bonds. It was a spiritual nation, a place where the boundary between the sacred and the everyday was as permeable as morning mist. The Hùng Kings understood that to govern a people descended from dragon and fairy, one must honor both the earthly needs of mortal bodies and the celestial longings of immortal souls. Throughout the kingdom, shrines appeared like wildflowers after rain, each one a place where people could commune with the spirits of their ancestors, with the protective deities of field and forest, with the very essence of the land itself. These were not grand temples demanding awe and submission, but intimate spaces where the divine and human could meet as old friends, sharing tea and comfortable silence. The most important of these sacred sites was dedicated to the worship of the Hùng Kings themselves, but not in the manner of distant, demanding gods. Instead, the kings were honored as the eternal parents of the nation, wise ancestors whose love and protection continued even after their earthly forms had returned to the elements from which they came. To this day, Vietnamese families gather each spring to honor the Hùng Kings, their celebration a bridge spanning nearly 3 millennia, connecting the modern world to this ancient moment when a people first learned to call themselves a nation. In the gentle governance of Văn Lang, we see reflected the character of the Vietnamese people themselves, practical yet spiritual, independent yet community-minded, respectful of tradition yet adaptive to change. The Hùng Kings ruled not through force but through example, not through fear but through love that flowed as naturally as water finding its course toward the sea. As the seasons turned and the years flowed by like water through cupped hands, the kingdom of Văn Lang grew in wisdom and prosperity. New techniques for growing rice transformed marshland into abundance. Artisans learned to work with bronze, creating tools that made life easier and ornaments that made it more beautiful. Traders established routes that connected mountain villages with coastal towns, weaving the kingdom together with threads of mutual dependence and shared prosperity. And always, at the heart of this growing civilization, was the understanding that true wealth lay not in accumulation, but in circulation, not in hoarding, but in sharing, not in conquering nature, but in learning to dance with its rhythms. The rice paddies spread like mirrors reflecting heaven on earth, each one a testament to the marriage of human wisdom and natural abundance. The children born in Văn Lang grew up knowing themselves to be part of something larger and more lasting than any individual life. They learned their trades from parents and grandparents who had learned from their own ancestors, each generation adding its own discoveries to the accumulated wisdom, while never forgetting the fundamental truths that made peaceful life possible. As you rest now in the embrace of this ancient peace, feel yourself becoming part of this eternal community. You too are a child of dragon and fairy, carrying within you the same capacity for harmony that built Văn Lang from mist and hope and human devotion. The gentle sounds of that long-ago kingdom surround you now, the soft splash of oars in still water, the whisper of wind through rice stalks, the distant laughter of children playing games that their great-grandchildren will teach to their own descendants. The Hùng Kings sleep peacefully in their sacred mountain, their dreams blessing all who remember that leadership is love made visible and governance is simply the art of helping a community become its truest, most harmonious self. In their rest, we find our own, cradled by the knowledge that some things, the most important things, endure across all the centuries like mountains watching over their valleys, like rivers returning always to the sea. Listen now, in the quiet spaces between your heartbeats, and you might hear it. A sound so ancient it seems to rise from the earth itself, a rhythm that speaks to something deeper than memory. It is the voice of bronze singing across the centuries, the sacred percussion that once called the spirits down from heaven and summoned the ancestors up from their peaceful rest. This is the sound of the Gyeongsan drums, and their music carries us deeper into the heart of ancient Vietnam, to a time when art and faith and daily life were woven together as seamlessly as moonlight on water. Picture yourself standing in a village clearing on a night lit by countless stars, so many and so bright that they seem close enough to pluck like fruit from celestial trees. The air is warm and still, heavy with the fragrance of jasmine and the green scent of rice paddies stretching away into darkness. Around you, the people of Van Lang have gathered in a great circle, their faces painted with anticipation and reverence, their bodies swaying gently to a rhythm that has not yet begun but already lives in their blood. At the center of this circle stands something extraordinary, a bronze drum taller than a grown man, its surface gleaming like captured sunlight even in the soft glow of torches. This is no mere instrument, no simple tool for making music. This drum is a universe in miniature, a sacred text written in metal and story, a bridge between the world of spirits and the realm of human hopes and dreams. The craftsmen who created this marvel worked with skills passed down through generations like precious heirlooms, their knowledge flowing from master to apprentice in an unbroken stream of wisdom and devotion. They understood that bronze is more than metal. It is the marriage of copper and tin, of mountain ore and patient fire, of human ingenuity and elemental power. To work with bronze is to participate in the ancient alchemy that transforms the raw materials of earth into objects of beauty and meaning. Watch now as the drum maker approaches his creation, this monument to his people's deepest beliefs. His hands, rough from years of handling fire and metal, touch the bronze surface with the tenderness of a parent stroking a sleeping child's hair. Every line etched into this drum tells a story. Every figure carved into its gleaming face carries the weight of collective memory and shared hope. On the drumhead, concentric circles radiate outward like ripples on a still pond, and within these circles, a whole world comes alive. Here, stylized birds stretch their wings in eternal flight, their forms so graceful they seem ready to lift from the bronze surface and soar into the star-filled sky. These are not just any birds, but sacred messengers, carriers of prayers from earth to heaven. Symbols of the soul's longing to transcend the boundaries of mortal flesh and join the eternal dance of spirits. Between the birds, boats glide across bronze waters, their hulls carved with such delicate precision that you can almost hear the gentle splash of oars and the soft murmur of conversation between passengers who journey not just across physical waters, but across the mysterious currents that separate the living from the ancestors, the known from the unknowable. And there, frozen in moments of pure joy, are human figures dancing with arms raised toward the sky, their bodies caught mid-movement in celebrations that echo across the centuries. These dancers are not performing for an audience. They are participating in the great cosmic dance that connects all living things, their movements a prayer made visible, their joy a bridge between earth and heaven. As the drum maker steps back, others approach carrying smaller instruments, rattles made from gourds and bamboo flutes that sing like wind through reeds, but all wait for the great drum to speak first, for its voice to call down the blessings of sky and water, mountain and forest, ancestor and unborn descendant. When the first strike comes, it is like thunder born in the deepest caves of the earth. The sound rolls across the countryside, through valleys and over hills, calling to scattered villages and isolated farmsteads. From miles away, people pause in their evening tasks, their heads turning toward the sound like flowers following the sun. Children stop their games and listen with wide eyes, while elders nod knowingly, remembering other nights, other gatherings, other moments when the bronze voice spoke for the entire community. But this is not merely sound, it is communication of the most profound kind. Each beat carries meaning layered upon meaning, speaking simultaneously to the practical needs of community organization and the spiritual hunger for connection with forces greater than individual human will. The drum announces ceremonies and celebrations, calls the people to witness marriages and mourn losses, marks the seasons and honors the ancestors who watch over their descendants with love that never diminishes. As the rhythm builds, other drums join in, their voices weaving together in harmonies that seem to emerge from the very structure of the universe itself. The smaller drums, each with its own voice and character, add their songs to the great symphony. Some speak in quick, bright tones like raindrops on leaves, while others offer deep, resonant bass notes that you feel more than hear, vibrations that travel through the ground and up into your bones. The people begin to move now, not in choreographed performance, but in spontaneous response to music that speaks directly to the body's ancient memory of rhythm and celebration. Feet find the beat naturally, bodies sway with the grace of trees in a gentle wind, and voices rise in songs that have no words but carry meaning deeper than language. This is the Jongsan culture in its full flowering, a civilization that understood something modern. Minds struggle to grasp that art is not decoration added to life, but the very essence of what makes life meaningful. These bronze drums, scattered now in museums around the world, were once the beating hearts of communities, the focal points around which entire societies organized their deepest values and most cherished beliefs. The skills required to create such masterpieces were themselves sacred knowledge, passed down through apprenticeships that lasted years and demanded not just technical mastery, but spiritual preparation. The bronze workers were part craftsman, part priest, part keeper of cultural memory. They understood the secret properties of metals, the precise temperatures required for perfect casting, the ritual preparations necessary to ensure that each drum would be not just beautiful, but spiritually potent. In their workshops, fires burned day and night, tended with the devotion usually reserved for temple flames. The copper came from mountain mines, where spirits were said to guard the precious ore, and ceremonies were required before any metal could be safely extracted. The tin arrived by trade routes that connected Van Lang to distant lands, each ingot carrying with it the blessings of foreign soil and the goodwill of traders who understood they were dealing in materials more precious than mere commercial goods. The casting of a great drum was itself a ceremony that could take days to complete. The entire community would gather to witness the moment when molten bronze, glowing like captured starlight, poured into molds that had been prepared with prayers and offerings. If the casting succeeded, it was a sign of divine approval, confirmation that the ancestors smiled upon their descendants' efforts to create beauty in their honor. But if something went wrong, if the bronze cracked or the pattern emerged flawed, it was understood not as failure, but as a message. A gentle reminder that human ambition must always remain humble before the greater mysteries of existence. Such drums were not discarded, but honored in their imperfection, reminders that even in failure, there can be profound meaning and unexpected beauty. As you listen now to the echo of these ancient drums calling across 25 centuries, feel your own heartbeat synchronizing with their eternal rhythm. The Đông Sơn drums speak to something universal in human nature, our need to gather, to celebrate, to mark the passage of time with ceremonies that transform ordinary moments into sacred ones. The birds carved into their bronze surfaces are still flying, carrying prayers from ancient Vietnam to wherever prayers go when they leave human lips. The boats are still sailing across bronze seas toward shores that exist beyond the reach of ordinary maps. The dancers are still dancing, their joy undiminished by centuries, their celebration eternal as the stars that shine down on all who remember that life itself is the greatest ceremony of all. Let the bronze voices carry you now deeper into sleep, their ancient rhythm a lullaby that has soothed countless generations. In the workshops of Đông Sơn, the fires still burn, the craftsmen still shape beauty from raw earth, and the drums still call across time and space to anyone willing to listen with the ears of the heart. Their message is simple and profound. You belong to something larger than yourself, something beautiful and lasting, something worthy of celebration that transcends the small concerns of any single life. The bronze drums fade now to a gentle whisper, their echoes settling like evening mist over the landscape of ancient Vietnam. As their voices quiet, other sounds emerge from the peaceful twilight. The soft splash of water buffalo moving through shallow channels, the melodic calls of farmers greeting the dawn, the gentle percussion of rain on broad leaves that shelter the pathways between villages. We are entering now the most intimate heart of Vân Lang civilization. The daily rhythms that sustained life and nurtured the soul through countless generations. Imagine yourself waking in a village beside the Red River as the first pale light of dawn touches the water's surface. The air is cool and sweet, carrying the green scent of growing rice and the rich, earthy fragrance of fertile mud. Around you, the world is awakening not with the harsh urgency of modern life, but with the gentle unfolding of a lotus blossom, each moment arising naturally from the one before. The house where you find yourself is built on stilts, its wooden posts standing like patient guardians above the ground that will soon be covered by the seasonal floods. This elevation is not mere practicality, but wisdom accumulated over millennia. The understanding that to live beside great rivers means to accept their moods and rhythms rather than fight against them. When the rains come and the waters rise, these homes become islands of safety and comfort, their inhabitants looking out over a transformed landscape where the boundaries between river and field disappear into a shimmering expanse of silver and green. Below the house, you hear the soft morning conversations of chickens and pigs, the domestic animals who share this elevated world and whose presence speaks of abundance and security. These creatures are not merely livestock, but partners in the ancient dance of survival. Their needs and contributions woven seamlessly into the fabric of daily life. From the river comes the sound of early fishermen, their voices carried across the water like musical notes on the morning breeze. They move in boats carved from single trees, vessels so perfectly shaped that they seem to have grown from the wood rather than been cut from it. Each boat is a masterpiece of practical beauty, its curves following lines that allow it to slice through water with minimal effort while carrying maximum load. Watch now as the village begins its daily transformation. As the sun climbs higher, families emerge from their raised homes and make their way down wooden ladders to the pathways that connect house to field, neighbor to neighbor, individual family to the larger community that embraces and sustains them all. The rice paddies stretch away from the village like a vast manuscript written in the language of water and earth. Each field is a perfect rectangle, its borders carefully maintained earthen dikes that channel water with the precision of a master calligrapher's brush strokes. This is not wild nature, but nature refined through generations of patient observation and gentle guidance. Landscape transformed into a partner in the great work of feeding and sustaining human life. But to understand these fields merely as food production would be to miss their deeper significance. These paddies are temples in their own right, sacred spaces where the marriage of human intelligence and natural abundance creates something approaching the miraculous. The people who tend them move through their daily tasks with the reverence of priests performing ancient rituals, each action informed by wisdom accumulated over countless seasons of planting and harvest. The day begins with the water ceremony, though those who perform it would never call it by such a formal name. It is simply the checking of the channels, the opening and closing of small gates that control the flow from field to field. But watch the farmers as they perform this work, and you will see that it is indeed ceremony, their movements deliberate and respectful. Their attention focused not just on immediate practical needs, but on the larger harmony that must be maintained between human need and natural rhythm. An elderly farmer, his back bent from decades of this careful work, approaches a wooden sluice gate that controls water flow to several fields. His hands, gnarled like ancient tree roots, know exactly how much to open the channel, how long to let the water flow, when to redirect it to the next field in the sequence. This knowledge is not written in any book, but lives in his muscles and bones, wisdom acquired through years of patient observation and passed down to him by his father, who learned it from his father before him. As the water spreads across the prepared earth, it creates perfect mirrors that reflect the sky, transforming each paddy into a fragment of heaven brought down to earth. Young rice shoots, tender green and impossibly delicate, emerge from this reflective surface like prayers made visible, their growth a daily miracle that never loses its power to inspire wonder in those who witness it. The women of the village arrive now, their wide-brimmed hats creating pools of shade as they wade into the shallow water. Their movements are poetry in motion, bending and straightening in rhythms as ancient as the tides. Their hands working among the rice shoots with a gentleness that speaks of deep understanding and profound respect for the plants that will sustain their families through another year. This is backbreaking work by any measure. Yet watch their faces and you will see not grim endurance, but a kind of meditative contentment. They sing as they work, their voices blending in harmonies that have been refined over generations, songs that match the rhythm of their labor and make the long hours pass like a pleasant conversation between old friends. The songs speak of many things: the beauty of the growing rice, the reliability of the seasons, the love between husbands and wives, the hopes they hold for their children, the gratitude they feel toward ancestors who cleared these fields and taught them the secrets of coaxing abundance from mud and water. These are not professional entertainers, but farming families creating the soundtrack for their own lives, music that emerges spontaneously from the joy of shared work and common purpose. As the morning progresses, children appear at the edges of the fields, too young for the heavy work, but old enough to help in small ways, and, more importantly, to learn through observation and imitation the skills they will need when their turn comes to take responsibility for feeding the community. They wade in the shallow water at field edges, catching small fish and frogs that supplement the family diet, their play seamlessly blending with practical contribution to household welfare. The sun climbs higher, and the heat begins to shimmer off the water surfaces, creating a dreamlike quality in the air that makes the whole landscape seem to pulse with life. This is when the water buffalo emerge, these massive, gentle creatures who serve as both partners and friends to the farmers. Despite their size and strength, they move through the fields with surprising delicacy, their hooves careful not to damage the tender rice shoots, their presence both practical necessity and comforting companionship. A young boy leads his family's buffalo to a fresh field, his small hand resting confidently on the animal's broad neck. The relationship between them speaks of trust built over years of shared work and mutual dependence. The buffalo provides strength for the heavy work of plowing and harrowing, while the boy provides guidance and care, ensuring the animal has adequate food, water, and rest. As midday approaches, the heat becomes intense enough to drive even the most dedicated workers to seek shade and rest. This is not seen as interruption of work, but as part of its natural rhythm, the understanding that sustainable effort requires periods of restoration and renewal. Families gather under the spreading branches of ancient trees that stand like islands throughout the agricultural landscape. These giants spared from clearing because their shade is as valuable as their wood would be. Under these trees, the community comes together for the midday meal and the sharing of news, concerns, and observations about the fields and the weather, the health of animals, and the progress of crops. This is governance at its most fundamental level. Decisions made not in distant councils, but in the shade where everyone affected by those decisions can participate in their making. The food they share is simple but nourishing. Rice from their own fields combined with vegetables from household gardens, fish from the rivers and ponds, fruits from trees that grow wild at field edges or are carefully tended in family groves. Nothing is wasted. Every part of every plant or animal finding its proper use in the economy of survival and abundance that these communities have perfected over countless generations. As afternoon brings slightly cooler air, work resumes, but now the pace is different, more relaxed, with time for conversation and laughter, for the sharing of stories and the planning of evening activities. This is when the spiritual dimension of agricultural life becomes most visible. As farmers pause in their work to make small offerings at field shrines, to whisper prayers for good weather and healthy crops, to express gratitude for the abundance that surrounds them. These shrines are simple affairs, perhaps just a few stones arranged under a tree or a small wooden altar at the intersection of irrigation channels. But their simplicity speaks of a spirituality so integrated into daily life that it requires no grand gestures or elaborate ceremonies. The sacred is present in every handful of mud, every rice shoot, every drop of water that nourishes the growing grain. As the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, painting the water in the paddies with gold and crimson, the day's work gradually comes to an end. Tools are cleaned and stored, water gates are adjusted for the night's needs, animals are led back to their shelters. But the transition from work to evening rest is not abrupt, but gradual. Like a musical phrase that resolves naturally into silence, the sounds of evening begin to emerge, the calling of birds returning to their roosts, the gentle lowing of cattle being brought in from pasture, the voices of children playing in the village paths, the splash of evening bathers enjoying the cooling water before darkness falls. These sounds blend into a symphony of contentment, the music of a community at peace with itself and its place in the larger world. As you rest now in this ancient rhythm, feel yourself becoming part of this eternal cycle of planting and growth, work and rest, individual effort and community support. The rice fields of Vân Long still exist in some timeless dimension, where the important work of feeding and sustaining life continues under the patient gaze of ancestors and the protective care of spirits, who never forget those who honor the land, with their careful attention and grateful hearts. But even in this peaceful realm of rice paddies and gentle rivers, where communities thrived through cooperation and harmony with nature, there came times when darker currents disturbed the tranquil flow of daily life. Like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon, threats would sometimes emerge from beyond the familiar boundaries of Van Lang, reminding the descendants of dragon and fairy that paradise, however well tended, must sometimes be defended by those with courage enough to stand between their people and harm. Picture yourself now standing on a hill overlooking the northern borders of the kingdom, where the cultivated landscape gradually gives way to wilder country, thick forests and mountain passes that could hide dangers as easily as they sheltered beneficial spirits. The air here carries different scents, not just the green sweetness of growing rice, but the sharp tang of pine resin, the earthy smell of leaf mold in deep woods, and something else, something that makes the breath catch and the heart beat faster, the scent of uncertainty, of a world beyond the ordered boundaries of home. Here, where civilization met wilderness, stood the guardians of Van Lang's peace. These were not professional soldiers in the modern sense, men who knew only war and lived apart from the communities they protected. Instead, they were farmers who could fight, fishermen who could track, craftsmen whose hands were as skilled with spear and bow as they were with plow and fishing net. When danger threatened, they set aside their peaceful tools and took up weapons, not from love of violence, but from love of the gentle life that violence sometimes threatened to destroy. In times of peace, you might find these guardian farmers working alongside their neighbors in the rice fields, their hands gentle among the tender shoots, their voices joining the work songs that made labor lighter and days shorter. But watch them closely, and you would notice certain differences. The way their eyes periodically scanned the tree line, their unconscious habit of positioning themselves where they could see approaches from multiple directions, the quiet authority in their voices when they spoke of matters beyond the immediate concerns of planting and harvest. Their weapons were not instruments of conquest, but tools of protection, crafted with the same care and spiritual attention that went into the making of bronze drums or the carving of ceremonial boats. The spears they carried were works of art as much as implements of war, their bronze points shaped by smiths who understood that a weapon used in defense of home and family carried responsibilities far beyond mere effectiveness in battle. Watch now as one of these guardian warriors examines his spear in the soft light of evening, running his thumb along the bronze point with the same careful attention a farmer might give to the edge of his plow. The weapon is perfectly balanced, its wooden shaft cut from bamboo that grew in sacred groves and seasoned with rituals designed to imbue it with spiritual as well as physical strength. The bronze head gleams with more than mere polish. It seems to glow with inner light, blessed by ceremonies that asked the ancestors to guide its use and ensure it would never strike except in righteous cause. The bow is equally sacred, its curve mimicking the arc of heaven itself, its string made from fibers that were gathered with prayers and twisted with songs designed to give it both flexibility and strength. To draw this bow is to participate in an ancient conversation between human intention and natural force. The archer, becoming a conduit through which the protective spirit of the land itself can act to defend its children. But perhaps most important of all were the arrows, each one individually crafted and individually blessed, their points sharp enough to pierce bronze armor, their flights cut from feathers donated by birds who were honored as messengers between earth and sky. These arrows were not mass-produced instruments of destruction, but individual prayers given physical form, each one carrying the hopes and protective love of an entire community. The training of these guardian warriors was as much spiritual discipline as physical preparation. They learned to move through forests as silently as shadows, to read the subtle signs that revealed the passage of strangers through familiar territory, to distinguish between the footprints of friend and foe, between the sounds made by wildlife going about its natural business and those that suggested human presence where none should be. But more than these practical skills, they cultivated the inner qualities that made them worthy defenders of a peaceful people. They learned patience that could endure hours of motionless watching, courage that would not fail when facing superior numbers, wisdom that could distinguish between genuine threats and false alarms that might lead to unnecessary conflict. Most importantly, they developed the spiritual discernment that allowed them to fight when fighting was necessary, while never losing sight of the peace they fought to preserve. When raiders did come, slipping down from mountain strongholds or emerging from distant forests where different peoples lived by different laws, the response of Van Lang was swift but never hasty, decisive but never cruel. Watchers hidden in trees would signal the approach of strangers, their calls indistinguishable from bird songs to untrained ears, but carrying precise information about numbers, weapons, and apparent intentions to those who knew how to listen. The community would respond like a living organism, each person moving to their assigned role without confusion or panic. Children and elders would withdraw to the safety of prepared refuges, often hidden caves or fortified areas deep in the forest where they could wait out whatever danger approached. Able-bodied adults would secure valuables and livestock, while the guardian warriors moved to positions where they could observe the intruders and determine whether peaceful contact might be possible or whether sterner measures would be required. Imagine watching such a deployment unfold, the quiet efficiency with which an entire village could seemingly vanish, leaving only the guardian warriors concealed in positions that commanded every approach. The silence that would descend was not the absence of life, but the presence of intense, focused attention, dozens of minds concentrated on the single task of protecting what they loved most deeply. The weapons they carried spoke of a military philosophy very different from that of conquering armies. The crossbow, an innovation that would later spread throughout Asia, allowed a defender to strike accurately from concealment, evening the odds when facing larger numbers. The bronze-tipped spears were designed not for cavalry charges across open battlefields, but for close combat in the confined spaces of forest paths and river crossings, where superior numbers counted for less than superior knowledge of local terrain. Their tactics reflected the same harmony with nature that characterized every other aspect of Van Lang civilization. They fought like the landscape itself, using rivers to channel enemies into predetermined killing zones, employing the thick forest canopy to provide concealment and the advantage of surprise. They struck when striking was most effective and melted away when direct confrontation would be foolish, always remembering that their goal was not military glory, but the preservation of the peaceful communities that depended on their protection. But perhaps, most remarkably, even in the midst of conflict, they never forgot their essential nature as people of the dragon and fairy, inheritors of wisdom that valued life above victory, harmony above dominance. When enemies were defeated, the survivors were not enslaved or slaughtered, but offered the choice of departure or integration, the understanding that today's enemy might become tomorrow's neighbor if treated with the respect due to fellow human beings struggling to survive in a difficult world. This warrior tradition, born from love rather than hate, from the desire to protect rather than to conquer, would echo through Vietnamese history for millennia to come. In every generation, farmers would set aside their peaceful tools when their communities were threatened. Fishermen would leave their nets to take up spears. Craftsmen would pause in their work to defend the workshops where they created beauty from raw materials and patient skill. The battles they fought were rarely recorded in the grand chronicles that celebrate the victories of kings and emperors. These were small conflicts, fought by ordinary people for ordinary reasons: the right to plant rice in their ancestral fields, the right to raise their children in communities where cooperation was valued above competition, the right to worship their ancestors and honor their traditions without interference from those who lived by different values. Yet, in these small battles lay the seeds of something that would prove stronger than any empire, more enduring than any dynasty. The spirit that moved these early defenders would be the same spirit that would inspire their descendants through thousands of years of challenges, invasions, and attempts at conquest. It was the spirit of people who knew exactly what they were fighting for because they had built it with their own hands, tended it with their own care, and blessed it with their own prayers. As you rest now in the quiet aftermath of these ancient conflicts, feel the protection of these long-ago warriors still surrounding you like an invisible shield. Their vigilance was not just for their own time, but for all times. Their courage not just for their own people, but for the universal human right to live in peace and dignity. In their careful balance between necessary strength and essential gentleness, we find a model for how to face the challenges that every generation must meet while never losing sight of the values that make life worth defending. The bronze spears have long since returned to the earth from which their metal came, but the spirit that guided them remains undiminished, a part of the eternal heritage of all who understand. The true warriors fight not because they love war, but because they love peace too much to let it be destroyed by those who know only the language of violence. In the gentle twilight between day and night, when the last bronze drums have fallen silent and the guardian warriors have returned to their peaceful villages, we enter now the most mysterious realm of ancient Vietnam, the world of spirits and symbols, of sacred markings and holy objects that served as bridges between the visible world of rice paddies and bronze tools and the invisible world of ancestors and protective deities that watched over every aspect of daily life. Picture yourself walking through a village in the deep hours before dawn, when the mist rises from the river like the breath of sleeping dragons, and every shadow might conceal a spirit going about its ancient business. The air itself seems alive with presence, thick with meanings that exist just beyond the reach of ordinary understanding. Heavy with the accumulated prayers and offerings of countless generations who knew that the material world was only the surface of a reality far deeper and more wonderful than mere flesh and bronze could ever reveal. Here, carved into the trunk of an enormous tree that stands at the village center like a pillar supporting heaven itself, you see your first glimpse into this sacred dimension. The bark has been carefully shaped into the image of a great bird, its wings spread wide as if caught in the moment of taking flight toward the star-filled sky. This is not mere decoration, but living scripture, a text written in wood and reverence that speaks to those who know how to read the ancient language of symbol and spirit. This bird is the lackbird, the sacred crane that serves as messenger between the world of humans and the realm of ancestors. Its image appears everywhere in the art of ancient Vietnam, carved into bronze drums, painted on pottery, tattooed onto the living skin of those who seek its protection and guidance. To see this bird is to be reminded that every soul contains within it the capacity for flight, for transcending the limitations of earthly existence and joining the eternal dance of spirits who have completed their earthly journey. But the blackbird is only one voice in a vast chorus of sacred symbols that transformed the landscape of Vân Lang into a living temple. Walk further through the village, and you will discover carved stones that bear the image of dragons, their serpentine bodies coiled in patterns that mirror the flow of rivers and the movement of clouds across the sky. These dragons are not the fearsome monsters of Western imagination, but benevolent spirits of water and fertility, guardians of the rice paddies and protectors of fishermen who venture onto the rivers that give life to the land. Each dragon carving is unique, shaped by hands that understood they were not creating mere ornament, but participating in the ancient work of making the invisible visible, of giving form to forces that existed beyond the reach of ordinary sight, but whose presence could be felt in every drop of rain, every fertile flood, every successful harvest that filled the village granaries with abundance. Near the dragon stones, you find others marked with the disk of the sun, its rays spreading outward like the spokes of a great wheel that turns the seasons and marks the passage of time. These solar symbols speak of the Vietnamese understanding that life depends not just on water and earth, but on the fire of heaven, the cosmic force that calls forth growth from planted seeds and warmth from winter's cold embrace. But perhaps the most intimate and personal of all sacred symbols were those carried not on stone or bronze, but on human skin itself, tattooed into the flesh with inks made from sacred plants and applied with needles carved from holy wood. In ancient Vietnam, the body was understood not as mere physical housing for the spirit, but as a canvas upon which one could inscribe protection, identity, and connection to the forces that governed life and death. Imagine meeting a village elder whose arms and chest bear an intricate tapestry of such markings. At first glance, they might seem like mere decoration. Beautiful but meaningless patterns in blue and black that catch the eye without engaging the mind. But look more closely, and you begin to see the profound meaning woven into every line and curve. Here, spiraling around his forearm like a living bracelet, is the image of a serpent that represents his family's ancestral spirit, the protective force that has watched over his lineage for generations beyond counting. The serpent's eyes are positioned so that they seem to look outward from his skin, scanning the world for dangers that might threaten his descendants, its mouth open as if ready to speak warnings or offer guidance to those wise enough to listen. On his shoulder, a stylized lotus blossom marks him as one who has achieved a certain spiritual status within his community, someone whose advice is sought in matters requiring both practical wisdom and spiritual discernment. The lotus, rooted in mud but blooming in pure air above the water's surface, symbolizes the human journey from earthly concerns to celestial understanding, from material needs to spiritual fulfillment. But the most striking tattoo of all covers his back in an elaborate scene that tells the story of his own life's journey. Here are the rice paddies where he learned to work as a child, rendered in flowing lines that capture not just their physical appearance, but their spiritual significance as places where human effort joins with natural blessing to create sustenance. There is the river where he first learned to fish, its waters suggested by curves and spirals that seem to move even in the stillness of ink on skin. And there, dominating the entire composition, is the great drum that called him to his first ceremony of adulthood, its bronze surface rendered in tattoo ink with such skill that you can almost hear its deep voice calling across the years. This drum connects him not just to his own past, but to the eternal rhythm that has guided his people since the children of dragon and fairy first learned to live in harmony with the land that sheltered and sustained them. These tattoos were not applied for aesthetic reasons alone, though they were certainly beautiful. They served as identification, marking the wearer's family, village, and spiritual affiliations in ways that could be read by anyone who knew the symbolic language they embodied. They provided protection, their sacred images serving as barriers against harmful spirits and malevolent influences that might otherwise find easy entry into an unprotected soul. Most importantly, they served as reminders, keeping constantly before the wearer's consciousness the spiritual realities that gave meaning to physical existence. Each morning, as he bathed in the river, the tattooed man would see reflected in the water, not just his own face, but the accumulated symbols of everything he held sacred, everything that connected him to forces greater than his individual life. The creation of such tattoos was itself a sacred ritual, performed only by specialists who had undergone years of training not just in the technical skills required to apply ink to skin without causing harm, but in the spiritual knowledge necessary to choose appropriate symbols and arrange them in patterns that would provide maximum protection and benefit to the wearer. These tattoo masters were part artist, part priest, part healer, their workshops serving as places where the practical and spiritual dimensions of life merged into a single unified practice. They knew which plants yielded inks that would remain bright and clear for decades, which days were most auspicious for beginning new tattoos, which symbols were appropriate for different ages, genders, and spiritual conditions. The process of receiving a tattoo was understood as a form of pilgrimage, a journey that began long before the first needle touched skin and continued long after the last line was completed. The candidate would fast and purify themselves, making offerings to ancestors and protective spirits, seeking dreams and omens that would guide the selection of appropriate designs. When the actual tattooing began, it was accompanied by chanting and the burning of sacred incenses, the pain of the needles understood not as suffering to be endured, but as sacrifice offered in exchange for spiritual protection and insight. Many reported receiving visions during the tattooing process, seeing their ancestors or guardian spirits appearing to offer guidance and blessing for the journey ahead. But sacred symbols in ancient Vietnam were not limited to those that could be carved, cast, or tattooed. Some of the most powerful existed in forms so subtle that only the most spiritually sensitive could perceive them. Patterns of arrangement in seemingly random collections of stones, alignments of trees that created invisible lines of force connecting distant sacred sites, the careful positioning of ordinary objects in ways that accumulated spiritual power over time. A simple cooking pot, placed in exactly the right relationship to hearth and doorway, could become a focus for family protection and prosperity. A fishing net, hung to dry in patterns determined by ancient tradition, could ensure safe return from dangerous waters. Even the arrangement of sleeping mats within a house followed principles that connected the family's rest to cosmic forces that governed health, harmony, and spiritual well-being. As you rest now in this world where every object carries meaning beyond its practical function, where every marking speaks of connection to forces greater than individual will, feel yourself becoming part of this ancient web of symbols and spirits. The tattoos may have faded from the skin of their original bearers. The carved stones may have weathered smooth, but the spiritual reality they represented remains as vivid and protective as ever. You too carry invisible markings that connect you to sources of strength and wisdom beyond ordinary comprehension. You too participate in the eternal conversation between human need and spiritual provision that has sustained communities through all the challenges that life presents to those brave enough to seek meaning in the midst of mystery. Time flows like a great river now, carrying us forward through the centuries, while keeping us suspended in the gentle current of story and dream. The sacred symbols fade softly into memory, but their protective power remains, watching over us as we journey deeper into the unfolding tale of ancient Vietnam. The mists of early morning are gathering now around a new chapter in this timeless story, one that speaks of unity emerging from diversity, of strength born from the marriage of mountain and valley, highland and lowland, the eternal dance between different peoples who discover they are not so different after all. Picture yourself standing on a hilltop in what is now northern Vietnam, some 23 centuries ago, as the first light of dawn reveals a landscape in transition. Below you, the familiar rice paddies of Vân Lang stretch away toward the horizon, their surfaces still dark with pre-dawn shadow, but beginning to catch the first glimmers of reflected sky. But if you turn toward the mountains, you see something new. Smoke rising from settlements in the higher valleys, the mark of a different people who have learned to make their home among peaks and ridges where the air is thin and the seasons follow different rhythms than those known in the river deltas. These are the U Viet, the mountain people whose ancestors followed the fairy Ao Ko to the high places when the children of dragon and fairy first divided to claim their separate destinies. For centuries, they have lived in their mountain fastnesses, developing their own ways of survival, their own traditions, their own understanding of how to read the signs that heaven writes in cloud and wind, and the flight of high-soaring birds. They are not strangers to the lowland people, these mountain dwellers. Trade routes connect their settlements to the markets of Vân Lang, and young people from both peoples sometimes find love that transcends the boundaries of altitude and custom, yet they remain distinct, shaped by landscapes that demand different skills, different wisdom, different ways of moving through the world. But now, in this pivotal moment we witness, a vision is beginning to form in the mind of a remarkable man whose name will echo through Vietnamese history like the sound of bronze drums calling across vast distances. His name is Thuc Phan, but history will know him as An Duong Vuong, the king of peace and light, the one who will unite mountain and valley into something greater than either could achieve alone. An Duong Vuong is himself a child of two worlds, born of mountain people but educated in the ways of the lowlands, familiar with the patient rhythms of rice cultivation, but also versed in the warrior skills needed to survive in the high country, where tigers pad silently. Through morning mist and sudden storms can turn familiar paths into death traps for the unwary. In his mind, shaped by experiences that span both mountain and valley, a new possibility is taking form. He has seen how the lowland people excel at working together, how their communities function like living organisms where each member contributes to the health and prosperity of the whole. He has witnessed the harmony they achieve with water and earth, the abundance they coax from flooded fields through patient cooperation with natural rhythms. But he has also seen their vulnerability, the way their scattered villages can be overwhelmed by determined raiders who strike quickly and disappear back into mountain strongholds before organized resistance can form. From his mountain heritage, he knows different strengths, the warrior skills that allow small groups to defend seemingly impossible positions, the intimate knowledge of terrain that can turn every ridge and valley into an ally, the fierce independence that makes mountain people formidable opponents for any would-be conqueror. But he has also seen how this independence can become isolation, how mountain communities can struggle to achieve the prosperity that comes from large-scale cooperation and trade. In the quiet hours before dawn, as he looks out over both mountain and valley from his vantage point between worlds, Nduang Vuong begins to envision something unprecedented, a kingdom that would unite the strengths of both peoples while minimizing their individual weaknesses, a realm where mountain fortress could protect valley abundance, where lowland organization could support highland independence, where the children of dragon and fairy could at last discover the full potential that lay dormant in their divided inheritance. But vision alone, however grand, cannot create kingdoms. The path from dream to reality would require all the wisdom, courage, and spiritual insight that Nduang Vuong could muster, along with the support of others who shared his understanding that the time had come for a new kind of unity to emerge from the ancient divisions that had shaped their ancestors' choices. The process began not with conquest, but with conversation, not with armies, but with embassies. And Nduang Vuong understood that lasting unity could not be imposed from outside, but must grow from within, from the recognition by both peoples that they had more to gain from cooperation than from continued separation. He began by meeting with leaders from both mountain and valley communities, sharing his vision and listening to their concerns, their hopes, their fears about what such a union might mean for traditions they held sacred. These were not quick negotiations conducted in the formal chambers of royal palaces, but long conversations around evening fires, informal discussions during market days, patient explorations of possibilities that honored the legitimate interests of all involved. Slowly, like the dawn that was even now beginning to paint the eastern sky with colors of gold and rose, consensus began to emerge that the time was indeed ripe for a new beginning. The actual moment of union, when it came, was marked not by the clash of weapons, but by ceremonies that honored both traditions. Representatives from mountain and valley communities gathered at sacred sites where the boundaries between their territories met, bringing offerings that symbolized their willingness to share their distinctive strengths for the common good. The mountain people brought their warrior skills and their knowledge of defensive positions, their understanding of how to live in harmony with the fierce spirits of high places where weather could change from benevolent to deadly in the space of a single breath. The valley people contributed their expertise in agriculture and governance, their mastery of the arts that transform individual effort into collective prosperity. From this union emerged the kingdom of Olak, a name that honored both constituent peoples. O for the mountain dwellers who followed the ferry to the heights, Lak for the valley people who learned their wisdom from the dragon of the depths. It was more than a political arrangement. It was a spiritual reunification of forces that had been divided since the original children of dragon and fairy chose their separate paths toward mountain and sea. And Nduang Vuong, now recognized as king by both peoples, understood that this new kingdom would need a new kind of capital, a city that could serve the needs of both mountain and valley dwellers while embodying the unified vision that had brought them together. The location he chose was itself symbolic, a site where rivers from the mountains joined to create the broader streams that nourished the rice paddies of the lowlands, a place where the geography itself spoke of union and mutual nourishment. Here, where water from high peaks mingled with currents from gentler slopes, construction began on what would become one of the most remarkable cities of ancient Southeast Asia, Ko Loa, the ancient snail, named for the spiral pattern of its defensive walls that coiled around the central citadel, like the shell of some enormous creature emerging from primordial waters. But Ko Loa was more than just a capital. It was a statement of principles made manifest in stone and earth. Its design incorporated the best defensive wisdom of the mountain peoples with the organizational skills of the valley communities. The spiral walls could channel attacking forces into predetermined killing zones while providing multiple fallback positions for defenders, but they also created spaces for markets, workshops, and residential areas that could support a large civilian population in times of peace. At the heart of the city rose the royal palace. But this was no isolated fortress where the king lived apart from his people. Instead, it was designed as the center of a web of relationships that connected the ruler to every level of society, with audience halls where any citizen could seek justice, workshops where royal craftsmen created objects of beauty and utility, gardens where the king himself could be seen tending plants that would feed his household and symbolically nourish his realm. The construction of Ko Loa became a project that involved the entire kingdom, with workers arriving from mountain villages and river settlements, each group bringing their own specialized skills and cultural perspectives to the great work. Mountain people contributed their expertise in quarrying and shaping stone, their knowledge of how to build structures that could withstand earthquake and storm. Valley people provided their understanding of hydraulic engineering, their mastery of techniques for managing water flow and drainage that would keep the city healthy and prosperous. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Ko Loa was not its military defensive capabilities or its administrative efficiency, but the way it served as a living symbol of the spiritual unity that An Duong Vuong had envisioned. Throughout the city, shrines honored both mountain spirits and valley deities, sacred spaces where people from different backgrounds could worship together while maintaining their distinctive traditions. The great temple at the city's heart contained altars dedicated to the dragon and the fairy, but also to the countless lesser spirits that governed daily life in both mountain and valley, the spirits of specific rivers and particular peaks, the protective deities of individual crafts and occupations, the ancestral guardians who watched over family lineages that now found themselves citizens of a realm larger than anything their forefathers had imagined. As the city took shape and the kingdom grew in strength and prosperity, An Duong Vuong's reputation spread far beyond the boundaries of Olak. Traders from distant lands brought not only goods, but stories of this remarkable realm where former enemies had become allies, where diversity was celebrated as strength rather than feared as weakness, where a king ruled not through intimidation, but through the example of wisdom and justice applied fairly to all his subjects, regardless of their origins. Yet even in this time of unprecedented prosperity and harmony, shadows were gathering on the northern horizon. Far away, in the land that would one day be called China, ambitious warlords were beginning to cast covetous eyes toward the rich lands of Southeast Asia, seeing in the growing wealth and stability of kingdoms like Olak opportunities for conquest and expansion that would feed their own imperial ambitions. But for now, in this moment suspended between triumph and trial, the people of Olak lived in a golden age where the best dreams of their ancestors seemed to be taking form in the waking world. Children who were half mountain and half valley played together in the spiral streets of Ko Loa, their laughter, a promise that the divisions of the past need not define the possibilities of the future. And in his palace at the heart of the great city, An Duong Vuong looked out over his united kingdom and allowed himself to hope that he had created something that would endure, a legacy that would honor both the dragon and the fairy, while pointing toward possibilities that neither could have achieved alone. As you rest now in the golden light of this brief moment of perfect unity, feel the peace that comes from understanding that separation is not destiny, that differences can become strengths when approached with wisdom and goodwill. The spiral walls of Koloa continue to coil through time and space, protecting all who understand that true security comes not from excluding others, but from creating communities spacious enough to embrace the full diversity of human experience and aspiration. But golden ages, like perfect summer days, carry within their very perfection the seeds of their own ending. As we drift deeper into this ancient story, the warm light of Olak's prosperity begins to dim. Not extinguished suddenly like a candle blown out by harsh wind, but fading gradually like sunset over tranquil waters, beautiful even in its ending, leaving behind colors that memory will treasure long after darkness falls. Picture yourself now standing once again on the spiral walls of Koloa, but the season has changed. Where once you saw the green abundance of peaceful fields and bustling trade routes, now you observe a landscape touched by the first frost of approaching winter. The air carries different scents, not just the familiar fragrances of ripening rice and blooming flowers, but something sharper, more urgent, the metallic tang of weapons being prepared, the smoke of signal fires carrying messages across distances that grow more ominous with each passing day. From the northern mountains, troubling reports have been arriving with increasing frequency. Scouts speak of large armies moving through passes that have known only the peaceful passage of traders and pilgrims, of camps where foreign soldiers drill in formations unknown to Vietnamese military tradition, of supply trains that stretch for miles through valleys that once echoed only with the songs of farmers and the laughter of children at play. The leader of these northern forces is a man whose very name seems to carry winter in its sound, Trio Jia, a general in service to the expanding Chinese Empire, a warrior who has spent his life learning the arts of conquest and subjugation. Where Duong Vuong built unity through patient negotiation and mutual respect, Trio Jia advances through intimidation and force, his understanding of power shaped by philosophies that see diversity as weakness to be eliminated rather than strength to be celebrated. In the palace at Koloa's heart, Duong Vuong receives these reports with the calm dignity of a ruler who has always known that every golden age must eventually face its testing time. He is older now, his hair touched with silver, his face bearing the lines that come from years of carrying responsibility for countless lives and dreams. But his eyes remain clear, his judgment unclouded by either false optimism or paralyzing fear. The king understands that this challenge is different from the raiders and small conflicts that his kingdom has successfully weathered in the past. This is not a dispute between neighboring peoples who share fundamental values about how civilized communities should function, but a collision between entirely different visions of what human society can and should become. The approaching army represents not just military threat, but an alien philosophy that sees conquest as virtue and submission as the only alternative to destruction. Yet even in this darkening hour, Duong Vuong's greatest strength becomes, paradoxically, the source of his greatest vulnerability. The very qualities that made him successful in uniting mountain and valley peoples, his trust in negotiation, his belief in the basic goodness of human nature, his conviction that reasonable people can always find peaceful solutions to their differences, these same qualities make it difficult for him to comprehend the mindset of those who see negotiation as weakness and peaceful intention as opportunity for exploitation. It is in this context of mounting tension and difficult choices that we encounter one of the most poignant figures in all of Vietnamese history, Princess Mai Chau, Duong Vuong's beloved daughter, whose very name means beautiful pearl. She is everything a father could wish for in a child: intelligent, compassionate, skilled in both the arts of peace and the necessities of leadership. beloved by her people for her kindness and respected by visitors for her wisdom. Picture her as she moves through the palace gardens in the early morning, her silk robes rustling like wind through bamboo leaves, her presence bringing light to spaces that have grown heavy with the weight of impending decisions. She pauses beside a lotus pond, watching the flowers open to greet the sun. And in her face, you can see both the serenity she has inherited from her father and the subtle shadow of concern that has begun to touch everyone in the kingdom who understands the gravity of their situation. It is here, in this garden where beauty and worry exist side by side like light and shadow in a painting, that destiny begins to weave the threads that will determine the fate of Ulak. For my Chow is not destined to remain safely within the protected walls of Ko Loa, observing events from a distance. Instead, she will become central to them, her personal choices carrying consequences that ripple far beyond her individual life to shape the future of an entire civilization. The catalyst for these fateful events comes in the form of a young man whose arrival at the court of Ulak seems, at first, like nothing more than a pleasant diplomatic opportunity. His name is Trong Thui, and he presents himself as an envoy from the Northern Territories, a representative of Trio Ja's court, who has come to explore possibilities for peaceful resolution of the tensions that trouble both kingdoms. Trong Thui is everything that diplomatic protocol could require: well-educated, eloquent in his speech, respectful in his manner toward the customs and traditions of Ulak. He speaks with apparent sincerity of his leader's desire to avoid unnecessary conflict, of the mutual benefits that could flow from negotiated settlement, of his own personal commitment to finding solutions that honor the legitimate interests of both peoples. But most fatally of all, he is handsome, charming, and possessed of that particular magnetism that makes even cautious hearts vulnerable to the possibility of love. When he encounters Princess Mai Chao during a formal reception, their meeting seems blessed by all the romantic deities who watch over young people discovering the mysterious country of the heart. Watch them as they walk together through the palace gardens, their conversation flowing as naturally as water finding its course toward the sea. He speaks to her of poetry and philosophy, of the beauty he sees in the landscape of Ulak and the wisdom he observes in its governance. She responds with the intelligence and grace that are her nature, sharing insights about her people's values and aspirations, their dreams for a future built on cooperation rather than conquest. Neither suspects, in these golden moments of courtship, that their love is being carefully cultivated by forces that care nothing for their individual happiness, but see in their mutual attraction an opportunity to accomplish through deception what might prove too costly to achieve through direct assault. Trong Thui, despite his genuine feelings for Mai Chao, remains loyal to his original mission, his heart divided between love for a woman and duty to a cause that will ultimately demand her betrayal. As their relationship deepens from acquaintance to friendship to love, the wider world continues its inexorable movement toward crisis. The armies of Trio Ja grow larger and more threatening, their presence in the Northern Territories becoming impossible to ignore or explain away as merely defensive preparations. Yet the negotiations continue, both sides maintaining the diplomatic fiction that peaceful resolution remains possible, even as they prepare for the military confrontation that seems increasingly inevitable. It is during this period of uneasy balance between hope and fear that An Duong Vuong makes the decision that will define his legacy for both its wisdom and its tragic consequences. Recognizing that conventional military resistance may not be sufficient to protect his kingdom against the forces gathering in the north, he turns to resources that exist beyond the realm of ordinary human capability, seeking aid from the spiritual powers that have always guided and protected the Vietnamese people. Through ancient rituals performed in the deepest chambers of his palace, rituals that connect him to the dragon and fairy who gave birth to his people, An Duong Vuong receives a gift of supernatural protection, a crossbow of extraordinary power. Blessed by the spirits themselves and capable of launching arrows that never miss their intended target, this mystical weapon, known as the Kim Kwai, becomes both his greatest hope and the instrument of his ultimate undoing. The crossbow is more than mere weapon. It is a symbol of the kingdom's spiritual strength, proof that the forces of good have not abandoned Olak in its hour of greatest need. Yet it also represents a tragic irony, for the very power that makes it effective also makes it vulnerable to the kind of betrayal that occurs not on battlefields, but in the intimate spaces where trust is given and received. As the final crisis approaches, as diplomatic options are exhausted, and both sides prepare for the confrontation that can no longer be avoided, Princess Mai Chao finds herself torn between loyalties that seem impossible to reconcile. Her love for Trong Tui has become the center of her emotional life, yet her loyalty to her father and her people remains absolute. In her heart, she believes that love can transcend political divisions, that personal relationships can somehow provide a bridge across the gulf that separates opposing armies. It is this belief, innocent and noble in its origins, that leads to the moment when tragedy becomes inevitable. In the intimacy of lovers' conversation, in the trust that flows between hearts that have pledged themselves to each other, Mai Chao reveals to Trong Tui the secret of her father's mystical crossbow, never imagining that this knowledge will be used to destroy everything she holds dear. The betrayal, when it comes, unfolds with the terrible inevitability of thunder following lightning. Trong Tui, his mission finally clear even to himself, carries word of the Kim Kwai's power to Trio Ja's forces, providing them with the intelligence they need to neutralize An Duong Vuong's supernatural advantage and launch their final assault on the kingdom of Olak. As you drift now in the gentle darkness of sleep, let the sadness of this ancient betrayal wash over you like rain on still water, cleansing rather than bitter, a sorrow that teaches rather than destroys. In the tragedy of Mai Chao and Trong Tui, we glimpse eternal truths about the complexity of human nature, the ways in which love and loyalty can become entangled in conflicts that have no perfect solutions, no choices that do not require painful sacrifice. The spiral walls of Ko Loa are crumbling now in memory's twilight, but their destruction carries its own profound teaching, that even the greatest human achievements are temporary, that beauty and wisdom can be lost but never entirely destroyed, that every ending contains within it the seeds of new beginning for those who have courage enough to plant them in the fertile soil of hope and patient determination. In the quiet hours after great storms, when the wind has spent its fury and the rain has gentled to whispers, the landscape reveals both what has been swept away and what remains, rooted too deeply to be moved by any force that time and nature can unleash. So it is now, as we walk through the aftermath of Olak's fall, discovering that some losses, however painful, cannot touch the essential treasures that live not in palaces or fortifications, but in the enduring hearts of people who carry forward the best of what their ancestors achieved. Picture yourself standing among the ruins of Ko Loa in the gray light of dawn following that final fateful battle. The spiral walls that once coiled with such perfect symmetry around the heart of An Duong Vuong's kingdom now lie broken in places, their stones scattered like the pieces of a giant's puzzle, waiting for patient hands to restore their original pattern. Yet even in their damaged state, these walls retain a dignity that speaks of the vision that created them, the hope that shaped them, the love that motivated their construction. Here, where rubble blocks a pathway, you can still see the careful craftsmanship that went into each stone's cutting and placement. The way each block was shaped not just for structural integrity, but for beauty, creating walls that were as much works of art as they were instruments of defense. There, where a gate has been damaged but not destroyed, the intricate carvings that decorated its frame still speak their ancient message of welcome to honest visitors and warning to those who approach with hostile intent. But the true legacy of Ulak lies not in these physical remnants, remarkable though they are, but in something far more precious and enduring: the memory preserved in human hearts, the stories passed down through generations like sacred heirlooms, the understanding that what happened here was not just another rise and fall of political power, but a glimpse of possibilities that transcend any single moment in history. In villages throughout the former kingdom, in families whose lineages stretch back to those who served Nduong Vuong and mourned his defeat, the stories continue to be told. Grandparents gather their grandchildren around evening fires, their voices carrying across the generations not just information about past events, but wisdom about eternal truths that each age must rediscover for itself. Listen now to one such storytelling as an elderly woman, her hair white as morning mist, speaks to the children gathered at her feet like flowers surrounding an ancient tree. Her voice is soft but clear, shaped by decades of practice in the art of making the past live again in the present moment. Long ago, she begins, and immediately the children settle into the special stillness that comes when familiar magic is about to unfold. There lived a king who understood that true strength comes not from forcing others to obey, but from inspiring them to cooperate. His name was Nduong Vuong, and his kingdom was called Ulak, where mountain people and valley people learned to be one family under heaven's protective gaze. As her tale unfolds, the children see in their mind's eyes not the ruins that archaeologists will someday excavate, but the living kingdom in its prime. The spiral walls gleaming in sunlight, the markets bustling with traders from distant lands, the palace gardens where the king himself could sometimes be seen tending plants whose beauty served no purpose but to remind all who saw them that life contains room for wonder as well as necessity. They hear about Princess Mai Chao, whose beauty was matched by her wisdom, whose tragedy teaches that even the purest love can become entangled in circumstances that transform virtue into unwitting betrayal. They learn about the crossbow Kim Kwai, whose supernatural power could not protect against the kind of defeat that comes not from superior force, but from the complexity of human hearts divided between competing loyalties. But most importantly, they absorb the deeper lesson that the storyteller weaves through every detail of her narrative: that Nduong Vuong's kingdom fell not because his vision was wrong, but because it was ahead of its time, a glimpse of harmony that the world was not yet ready to sustain, but would continue to need. Continue to seek, continue to hope for, through all the centuries that followed its brief flowering. This understanding becomes part of these children's inheritance, as real and valuable as any material possession they might receive from their elders. When they grow up and face their own challenges, when they must choose between cooperation and conflict, between trust and suspicion, between building bridges and raising walls, they will remember the story of Ulak and find in it guidance for their own decisions. the physical artifacts of the kingdom, meanwhile, follow their own path through history, becoming treasures for those who know how to recognize their true worth. The bronze drums that once called communities to celebration and ceremony are carefully preserved by families who understand that they are not mere antiques, but living connections to ancestral wisdom. In workshops where traditional crafts are still practiced, artisans study the techniques that created Jongson masterpieces, not to copy them exactly, but to understand the principles that made them both beautiful and meaningful. Young metalworkers learning their trade discover that the ancient bronze makers were not just skilled technicians, but spiritual artists whose understanding of their craft encompassed far more than the mere manipulation of raw materials. The agricultural innovations of Vân Lang and O Lac continue to influence farming practices throughout the region, as each generation of rice cultivators learns from the accumulated wisdom of their predecessors. The terraced fields that climb mountain slopes like green staircases, the irrigation systems that channel water with the precision of calligraphy, the seasonal rhythms that coordinate individual effort with natural cycles, all these remain as practical legacies of a civilization that knew how to live in harmony with the land that sustained it. But perhaps the most profound and lasting legacy of ancient Vietnam lies in the realm of values and aspirations that continue to shape Vietnamese culture even today. The understanding that leadership is service, that strength comes from unity rather than domination, that the individual finds fulfillment through contribution to the common good. These insights, first embodied in the kingdoms of Vân Lang and O Lac, remain central to Vietnamese identity across all the centuries that separate us from their original flowering. Every spring, when families throughout Vietnam gather to honor the Hùng Kings, they participate in a ritual that connects them directly to these ancient roots. The ceremonies may have evolved, the language may have changed, but the essential meaning remains constant, the recognition that the present generation is not separate from the past, but continuous with it, that the ancestors are not gone, but present in a different form, that the values they embodied remain available to guide and inspire their descendants. In temples dedicated to An Duong Vuong, visitors can still feel the presence of the king who tried to unite mountain and valley into a single harmonious kingdom. His statue, carved with the serene dignity of one who faced defeat without losing faith in his vision, seems to offer encouragement to all who struggle to build bridges across the divisions that separate human communities. The story of Princess Mai Chao has become a cautionary tale about the complexity of love and loyalty, but also a celebration of the courage required to open one's heart, even when such openness carries the risk of pain and loss. Her tragedy speaks to universal human experiences that transcend any particular historical moment, reminding each generation that the choices between love and duty, trust and caution, forgiveness and justice are never simple, and always require wisdom beyond what any individual can easily achieve. Even the tale of Trong Thuy, the young man whose love became entangled with betrayal, serves an important purpose in the collective memory. Rather than being remembered simply as a villain, he represents the tragic figure of the person caught between competing loyalties, whose personal feelings become sacrificed to larger political forces beyond his control. His story reminds us that even those who cause great harm may themselves be victims of circumstances that offer no choices without painful consequences. The archaeological sites where Vân Lang and O Lac once flourished continue to yield discoveries that illuminate the sophisticated understanding of their inhabitants. Advanced techniques of bronze working evidence of extensive trade networks, indications of complex social organization. All these findings confirm what the stories have always maintained, that these were not primitive societies but highly developed civilizations whose achievements in many areas matched or exceeded what would be accomplished by later, supposedly more advanced cultures. Modern Vietnamese, whether living in the ancestral homeland or scattered across the globe by the currents of history and migration, carry within their cultural DNA the inheritance of these ancient kingdoms. The emphasis on education, the respect for elders, the understanding that individual success means nothing without family and community well-being, the belief that harmony is more valuable than victory. All these values can be traced back to the insights first embodied in the rice paddies of Van Lang and the spiral walls of Koloa. As you rest now in the gentle embrace of this enduring legacy, feel yourself becoming part of the great chain of memory and hope that connects the ancient past to the eternal future. The kings may have fallen, the kingdoms may have transformed into other forms, but the essential wisdom they embodied continues to flow like an underground river, emerging wherever people gather with goodwill to create communities based on mutual respect and shared responsibility. The bronze drums are still calling, their voices echoing across time and space to reach anyone willing to listen with the ears of the heart. Their message is simple and profound. You are not alone. You are part of something larger than yourself, something beautiful and lasting that neither time nor circumstance can ultimately destroy. In honoring the memory of what was achieved, we plant seeds for what may yet be accomplished by those who remember that every ending is also a beginning, every loss an opportunity for renewal, every defeat a lesson in the patient work of building civilizations worthy of the dreams that inspire them. In the deepest hours of night, when the boundary between waking and dreaming becomes as soft as silk floating on still water, we arrive at last at the most mysterious threshold of our ancient journey. Here, where history meets legend and memory embraces myth, we must ask ourselves the questions that have no easy answers, yet whose contemplation brings a peace deeper than any certainty could provide. What is the difference between what happened and what was remembered? Between what was recorded and what was true? Between the stories that preserve facts and the stories that preserve something far more precious, the essence of what it means to be human in a world both wonderful and terrible, both meaningful and mysterious? Picture yourself standing now in a place that exists neither in the material world nor in the realm of pure imagination, but somewhere between. A space where the mist of centuries has softened all the sharp edges of historical certainty, where the figures from our long tale move with the fluid grace of beings who are no longer bound by the limitations of flesh and time, yet remain more real than many things we encounter in our daily lives. Here comes Lac Long Quan, the Dragon King. But is he the mythical father of a people, or the symbolic representation of ancient Vietnamese understanding about the relationship between human communities and the water that gives them life? His form shifts in the gentle light of this timeless realm, now appearing as the magnificent dragon of legend, scales gleaming like captured starlight, now revealing himself as something more subtle, the collective memory of countless generations who learned to live in harmony with rivers and rain, flood and drought, the patient wisdom of those who understood that survival depends on cooperation with forces larger than human will. And there beside him moves Ukko, the mountain fairy, her presence both ethereal and substantial, carrying within her form all the accumulated knowledge of peoples who made their homes among peaks and valleys, who learned to read weather in the behavior of high-flying birds, who discovered medicine in mountain plants, and strength in the challenges that only those who live close to heaven can fully understand. Is she goddess or metaphor? The question dissolves in her gentle smile, becoming as irrelevant as asking whether music exists in the instrument or in the heart of the one who listens. Their 100 children gather around them now, but these are not the historical figures we might try to trace through archaeological evidence and ancient records. Instead, they are the living embodiment of diversity within unity, the eternal truth that communities thrive not through uniformity, but through the harmonious interaction of different gifts, different perspectives, different ways of contributing to the common good that sustains all life. Watch now as the Hùng Kings approach, their forms shimmering between the specific individuals who once ruled the kingdom of Vân Lang and the timeless principle of leadership, as service, governance, as the art of helping communities discover and actualize their highest potential. Their faces are both ancient and eternal, bearing the wisdom of those who understood that true authority flows not from power over others, but from the ability to inspire others to become their best and most generous selves. And Duong Vong joins this gathering of spirits, his presence carrying both the triumph of his vision and the sorrow of its temporary defeat. But here, in this space between myth and memory, defeat and victory reveal themselves as simply different phases in an eternal cycle of learning, growing, failing, and beginning again with deeper wisdom and more patient hope. His spiral city of Koloa appears and disappears around him like a mirage made of intention rather than stone, beautiful not because it was permanent, but because it demonstrated what becomes possible when human beings dare to dream of harmony across the divisions that seem to separate them. And there, most poignantly of all, we see Princess Mai Chao and Trong Thuy, their tragic love story transformed in this realm beyond time into something that speaks not just of individual loss, but of the eternal tension between the heart's longing for connection and the world's demand for choices that honor competing loyalties. Their embrace contains both the pain of betrayal and the beauty of love that transcends the circumstances that test it. Their story, a reminder that even the most painful experiences can become sources of wisdom for those who encounter them with open hearts. But as these figures from our ancient tale gather in this space between legend and history, they are joined by others whose presence reminds us that every story is part of larger stories. Every ending leads to new beginnings. Here are the farmers whose patient work with rice and water created the foundation for everything else, their faces bearing the quiet satisfaction of those who know that the most important work is often the least celebrated, the most essential contributions frequently the least visible to those who write the histories that future generations will read. Here too are the craftsmen whose skill with bronze and wood, silk and stone created objects of beauty that outlasted the kingdoms for which they were made, their hands still moving in the ancient rhythms of creation. Their understanding that true art serves not just aesthetic purposes, but spiritual needs, helping communities remember who they are and aspire to become even more than they have been. The bronze drum makers are here, their tools transform now into instruments of pure sound that resonates not just in physical ears, but in the depths of souls that hunger for connection to something larger than individual existence. Their drums beat with rhythms that connect the beginning of our story to its end. The first breath of creation to the last whisper of night, the heartbeat of the mother to the dreams of the child not yet born. And there, almost invisible until you learn to see with eyes that look beyond surface appearances, are the countless unnamed figures whose lives provided the foundation for everything that has been celebrated in song and story. the mothers who taught children the values that would guide them through challenges not yet imagined, the fathers who demonstrated through daily example what it means to care for something larger than oneself, the friends and neighbors whose quiet acts of kindness wove the social fabric that held communities together through times of both prosperity and trial. In this gathering of spirits, the question of what really happened becomes less important than the deeper question of what these stories continue to teach those who encounter them with hearts open to their deepest meanings. Did Lak Long Kwan and Ao Ko literally exist as the mythical beings described in ancient tales? Or are they the symbolic expression of truths too profound for mere historical recording? The answer matters less than our willingness to receive the wisdom they offer about the relationship between diversity and unity, about the ways in which apparent opposites can complement rather than contradict each other. Did the Hùng Kings govern exactly as the legends describe? Or do their stories preserve in mythic form the accumulated understanding of what leadership looks like when it serves the common good rather than personal ambition? The historical accuracy matters less than the continuing relevance of their example for anyone who faces the challenge of helping communities discover their capacity for cooperation and mutual care. Did An Duong Vuong's kingdom of O Lak achieve exactly the kind of harmony between mountain and valley peoples that our story has described? Or does his reign represent the eternal human aspiration for unity across differences, preserved in narrative form, because such aspirations deserve to be remembered even when they are not perfectly achieved? The factual details matter less than the inspiration his story continues to provide for those who believe that bridges can be built across any divide when approached with sufficient wisdom, patience, and goodwill. As these ancient figures begin to fade back into the mists from which they emerged, their voices join in a chorus that speaks not in words, but in the language of the heart, reminding all who listen that the most important truths cannot be contained in historical records or archaeological artifacts, but live in the ongoing life of communities that remember their deepest values and continue to strive toward their highest aspirations. The distinction between myth and history dissolves like morning mist touched by the first rays of sun, revealing a landscape where both belong, where both contribute to the larger work of helping human beings understand who they are, where they have come from, and toward what they might yet grow if they have courage enough to honor both their inheritance and their responsibility to future generations not yet born. In this place of eternal twilight where our story finds its rest, you are invited to release your need for certainty about which details are factual and which are symbolic, embracing instead the deeper certainty that comes from recognizing yourself as part of a story larger than any individual life, more enduring than any single civilization, more meaningful than any collection of historical facts could ever capture. The ancients are settling into their eternal sleep now, their dreams becoming part of the great dreaming that connects all consciousness across time and space. Their rest is not the rest of the dead, but the rest of those who have completed their immediate work and can now trust others to carry forward the values and aspirations they embodied in their own time. As you join them in this peaceful slumber, feel yourself becoming part of this eternal community of spirits who understood that life's deepest meaning lies not in personal achievement, but in contribution to the ongoing human project of creating communities worthy of the dreams that inspire them. In their dreams, you find your own deepest rest, cradled by the knowledge that some things transcend the boundaries of time and space. that love and wisdom and the longing for harmony are as eternal as the stars that shine down on all who seek to live lives worthy of the cosmic gift of consciousness itself. Sleep now with the ancients, dear traveler, and let their ancient peace become your own. And so we come to the end of our journey through the mists of time, back to the very beginning of Vietnam, where dragons danced with fairies, where bronze drums echoed across misty mountains, and where the first kingdoms rose from emerald rice fields like lotus flowers blooming at dawn. Perhaps you're wondering what happened to those ancient souls who walked these lands so long ago. Where did their spirits go when the kingdoms of Van Lang and Olak faded into legend? The truth is, they never really left. In every grain of rice that grows in the flooded fields of the Mekong Delta, in every bronze bell that rings in village temples, in every child who learns to paddle a small boat through quiet waterways, the spirits of Lac Long Quan and O Co live on. In Vietnam today, millions of people still gather each year to honor the Hùng Kings, not as distant historical figures, but as ancestors who still watch over the land, still guide their descendants through the endless cycles of planting and harvest, storm and sunshine, war and peace. The bronze drums of Jong Son may have fallen silent in their ancient villages, but their rhythms still pulse in the hearts of fishermen casting nets at dawn, in the songs mothers hum to their babies, in the ceremonial dances performed at temple festivals under the light of the full moon. King Unduong's fortress at Ko Loa may be ruins now. Grass-covered earthworks where buffalo graze peacefully, but the spirit that built those walls, the determination to protect home and family, that spirit lives on in every Vietnamese person who remembers their roots. And what of the tragic love story of Mai Chao and Trong Thuy? Even that heartbreak, that betrayal, that loss, it too became part of the eternal story, a reminder that love and loyalty must be balanced with wisdom, that trust is precious, precisely because it can be broken. You see, in Vietnamese culture, the past is not something dead and buried. It's alive, breathing, walking alongside the present. The ancestors are not gone. They're simply sleeping, waiting to share their wisdom with anyone quiet enough to listen. And perhaps that's what you've been doing tonight, as you listen to these ancient stories. You've been sitting quietly beside a river of memory, letting the voices of those long-ago people whisper their secrets to your dreaming mind. The children of the dragon and the fairy learned something that we sometimes forget in our modern world. They learned that we are all connected to the land that feeds us, to the waters that sustain us, to the sky that shelters us, and to each other. They understood that every person carries within them both the earthbound wisdom of the fairy and the flowing power of the dragon, both the need to build homes and plant gardens, and the urge to explore distant horizons. So as you drift toward sleep tonight, let yourself imagine that you too are floating gently down the river of time, past the ancient bronze drums, past the misty mountains where dragons once flew, past the golden rice fields where the first farmers learned to feed their people. Feel the warm tropical rain on your face, as soft as the tears of O Ko when she said goodbye to her dragon husband. Hear the distant thunder, like the footsteps of Lac Long Quan walking back to his underwater palace. In your dreams tonight, you might find yourself walking through an ancient Vietnamese village at twilight, paper lanterns glowing softly along winding paths, the scent of incense drifting from family altars where ancestors are honored. Children's laughter echoing from the river where they splash and play. And if you're very quiet, very still, you might hear the bronze drums playing again, not the harsh clash of war, but the gentle rhythm of celebration, of gratitude, of a people who learn to find joy even in the midst of sorrow, beauty even in the heart of struggle. The spirits of ancient Vietnam want you to know something. They want you to remember that no matter where you come from, no matter what your own ancestors' stories might be, you too are part of this great river of human experience. You too carry within you the wisdom of those who came before, the courage of those who built kingdoms from nothing, the love of those who sacrificed everything for their children, the dreams of those who dared to imagine a better world. So sleep now, gentle dreamer. Sleep and let the ancient stories weave themselves into your own dreams. Let the bronze drums lull you deeper into the peaceful darkness where all stories begin and end. Let the misty mountains of Vân Long cradle you. Let the flowing rivers of O Loc carry you home to that quiet place where dragons and fairies still dance together, where time moves slowly as honey, where every breath is a blessing and every heartbeat is a prayer. Sleep well, child of the ancient stories. The ancestors are watching over you, and in your dreams you are home.